I did. I didn't want you to know, though.
The October 10th meeting of the Board of Education is now called to order. Please rise for the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. The pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Welcome to the meeting of the Board of Education. This meeting is being televised live on AACPS TV and live streamed on the internet. General information and protocols for the meeting are posted on the sign by the door as you enter the room, so please make sure you read those if you have not already. Item 2.03 is approval of the minutes. If there's no objection, they will stand as approved. Okay. Item 2.04 is establish agenda order, and the agenda stands. Oh, Mr. Grannon?
Hi, I'd like to add in review items 6.02, transportation issues update. And the reason for this is at the last meeting there were some transportation issues that were raised, and at least 2 board members asked that they be addressed again at this meeting. And I think it's important for the public to, one, see that kind of accountability. And I understand that the superintendent planned to report on these issues under superintendent's update, but I suggest that they be done in a specified agenda item so that there can be a record of it, and 2, so that people can know and prepare any public comments they might have in response to the superintendent's report.
Is there a second? Okay, there's no second, so the agenda stands as written. Item 2.05 is recognitions, and there are no recognitions today. Item 2.06 is Educator of the Month. Unfortunately, the board recently learned that our Educator of the Month for October was not able to attend the meeting today, so therefore our educator will be awarded in December. Item 2.07 is Employee of the Month, Mr. Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam President. Today we recognize a shining star in our school system who is responsible, reliable, and committed to his work. A shining star who serves as a cultural bridge between teachers, administrators, and most importantly, non-English speaking families. William Ray, interpreter and translator for AACPS, faithfully complies with the requirements of interpretation, such as accuracy, neutrality, and delivery of messages in a speedy manner. Not only does William perform perfectly in this field, he does so with the utmost ethics and professionalism in providing language services. William maintains a warm and calm manner when performing his job. Whether assisting with private parent-teacher conferences or interpreting at board meetings for large groups, he provides a comfort level that puts parents and staff at ease. He is skilled at simultaneous interpreting and is indispensable in facilitating communication between schools and parents. Mr. Ray is a true team player. When parents learn that William will be their interpreter as they enter a meeting or conference, they know with confidence that their message will be well conveyed and that they will completely understand the message of the provider. And when the bilingual facilitator learns that William will be the interpreter for the meeting, they know with confidence that the information will be presented accurately and feedback will be provided if necessary. Those qualities assure everyone involved in the transaction of interpretation services that the meeting will have positive results. When asked for a few words to describe William Ray, one of our school principals said the following: "William is incredible to work with as we bridge our languages and bring our families together. His positive attitude and friendly mannerisms allows our school to offer our families the opportunity to learn so that they can take home their new learning to their children. Always punctual and unbelievably flexible, William has helped us over the years build long-lasting relationships that bond our families and school as one." William Ray, you play a critical role in the success of the AACPS Spanish-speaking students and the Hispanic community. You have raised the bar in our school system, and you continue to raise it each day. So on behalf of the Board of Education, the students, teachers, and staff of Anne Arundel County Public Schools, congratulations on being recognized as Employee of the Month for October 2018. Some lovely gifts for you today.
By surprise.
Oh. Right, so how'd they get you here?
Just Gaston asked me for a meeting and just came over and
Oh, you okay.
didn't know.
Were you going to do any interpreting at the meeting?
No, actually.
No.
When I saw it, I thought, I said, no, probably it's not today.
So who surprised you? They were quite excited for you.
Gaston, and then I have my wife, David, and then Alba Morales, one of the bilingual facilitators, and my sister, one of the other interpreters for the county.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
And my boss here, Teresa.
Good job, good job. So we have this this lovely bell for you. It's engraved so that you'll always remember this time.
Thank you so much.
We also have a nice certificate for you, and we're going to ask for you to stick around after everyone's recognized. We're going to take some photos in the lobby.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And I will echo what was said. I see Mr. Ray everywhere. Every event we go to, he is there helping our families. So, item 2.08 is Volunteer of the Month, Ms. Korbalak.
Volunteerism is about relationships. It is about an individual's need to participate in society and to feel what they contribute matters to others. For some volunteers, building such relationships with the schools they serve comes with ease. They are tirelessly flexible, able to shift from making copies to working one-on-one with students to taking the lead on new initiatives. They are quite simply dedicated to the cause, and they will do whatever it takes to ensure that all students reach their full potential. Today we are here to celebrate the dedication of one such volunteer. Ms. Shannon Bottom, the Board of Education, is thrilled to honor you as our October 2018 Volunteer of the Month. According to reading teacher Janet Dougherty, Ms. Bottom greets everyone she sees and is truly there to help. She makes our jobs so much easier so we can focus on the reason we are all there, our students. The list of activities she's involved in is vast. Along with an assortment of clerical duties, Ms. Bottom works one-on-one with a second grader who is struggling with math, sitting with the student during math instruction twice a week, and supporting her use of math manipulatives to problem solve. She also serves as second grade room parent and assists on picture day and grandparents' day. As is common for such dedicated volunteers, it is not unusual for her to take the lead when working on a project. For instance, she serves on the park's motivational committee and took it upon herself to make the teachers' park survival treat bags. Her efforts do not end at the school door. School counselor Kim Patterson shared that Ms. Bottom frequently takes work home with her to finish up. Ms. Bottom is not only quick to complete tasks, she is also known for her positive energy. Principal Cheryl Cox made a point to commend Ms. Bottom on her rapport with the students. She is dependable and willing to do whatever is asked to make our school a better place. Education is truly a partnership, and Ms. Bottom is one of our finest partners. She loves the kids, and it shows in the way she looks at them when she is working with them or even just passing them in the hall. Ms. Bottom, you are a great asset to the Wild Chapel Elementary, Arundel Middle, and High, and the entire Anne Arundel County Public Schools community, and we are truly grateful for your years of service as a volunteer. Would you please come forward? It is with great appreciation that I would like to present the Volunteer of the Month certificate and bell to you. Here is a certificate. Thank you. And a bell you can use to call for help. How'd they get you here?
She told me Watt Chapel was getting an award.
Well, they are.
No, but I didn't take this for awards.
Well, congratulations, and we'll take some pictures after public comment. Or
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, Janet came with me, and Miss Cox, the principal. We have my husband, and then my 3 children, and then my wonderful neighbors, Christy and Howard, and their beautiful little girl, Hope. Thank you so much.
Item 2.09 is school and community highlights. Anyone? No one from the board? All right. Well, many of us attended the MABE annual, the Maryland Association of Boards of Education annual conference last week, along with Dr. Arlotto, and it was a great conference. One of the big focuses this year was on equity in schools, and MABE has created an equity policy, and our speakers were all on looking at equity issues through the equity lens as we make decisions as a board. So it was very challenging, and I hope it will give us good results moving forward with our board to focus even more so on the equity issues within our school system. I want to holler out at the purchasing department of Anne Arundel Public Schools. For the 7th year in a row, they were named one of the best purchasing departments by the National Procurement Institute. They're only one of 26 school systems in the entire country out of thousands of school systems. And they've set the bar really high, 7 years in a row. I'm not sure how they can, they got to keep rolling on this. So year 8, so that they are standout as a leader in the country for innovation and cost savings and accuracy, and they're just an amazing team. So congratulations to the purchasing department. And one last thing, when we were at MABE, we were turning over from MABE, but I want to thank Stacy Korbelak has been leading the legislative committee for the Maryland Association of Boards of Education for the past couple of years, and has done a fabulous job representing not only us but all the school systems in the state for legislation that impacts on schools. So Stacy, thank you very much for your service for that time. So Mr. Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam President. I know that generally these school community highlights are a time to talk about happy things and the great things going on in our community. I just wanted, on behalf of the board, to express my deepest regrets for the loss of Miss Manning, Miss Marianne Manning, who's a special educator at North County. I'm sorry. She had been there more than 15 years. I had the pleasure of working with her in my time there. And with the students that she works with, I know that they're having a very difficult time understanding what's happened and why she can't be there with her today. So my heart goes out to those kids, and I want to commend Dr. Alston for going out with his team and bringing back our past assistant principals who'd worked with those students, and just it's a terrible loss.
Thank you, Mr. Reinhardt. Item 2.10 is the CAC.
Good morning, President Hummer, Vice President Gillian, Dr. Alato, and the rest of the board members. For the record, my name is Brandon Gully, and I'm with the Citizen Advisory Committee. We had our meeting Monday night. It was a very busy meeting. We had to elect a new vice chair, so we did that, Tanisha Howard, and looking forward to working with her. We also assigned officers for various roles, like the policy meeting, our Facebook page, and that sort of thing. We also began the conversation on developing like a mentor program so that new people that are coming into the CAC can get ramped up more quickly. So we started taking volunteers for getting that going. We spent the majority of the time discussing the subcommittee reports. We distributed a support document with timelines and expectations for what those reports will look like. So we'll be working on locking down the different topics that we'll be focusing on and sharing those with you guys soon. But we thought it went really well. We had a Q&A period for the new members. We had the experienced members share kind of what they've experienced with the report. So I'm actually hoping that the reports that you guys get are going to be of the highest quality. So that's what we're shooting for. We also implemented an ear to the ground portion of the meeting. So we're going to start spending active time talking about what we're hearing in the communities and then deciding who to funnel that information up to. And on the flip side, being a resource to funnel resources back down to the community of who they need to talk to and who the best resource is to help them out. So we're looking to actually build something around that we'll share with you guys as well as that comes together. And then finally, we closed with some reminders about the Family Involvement Conference and the Special Education Resource Fair that are coming up. And we'll be sure to share that information back down to our communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Item 2.11 is the superintendent's update.
Thank you, Mrs. Hummer. I have 3 updates for this morning. The first 2 are about transportation issues recently brought to the board's attention, and the third update is in regard to our ongoing water testing. At our last board meeting, you heard testimony regarding 2 transportation issues. In the first, a parent shared their concern regarding the lack of transportation for their children to and from Lindale Middle School. As I shared at our last meeting, this family lives within the 1.5-mile walk radius of the school, yet they contend that the walk to school is unsafe. I have reviewed the decision of our Transportation Division and have no new information to share beyond the details that I shared with this board 2 weeks ago. I would encourage the parents to appeal the decision to me and to share any additional information they believe is pertinent to their request. This will allow any decision I make to be appealed to this board. Also, at our last meeting of this board, a parent shared his concern regarding a letter they received from our Transportation Division stating that their child could no longer ride the bus from their neighborhood to High Point Elementary School, which is a half-mile from the school. The issue at hand in this situation is that children in this neighborhood do ride a bus to and from school if they are either pre-K or kindergarten students. The walk radius for those students is a half a mile. The walk radius changes to a mile in grades 1 through 5. Therefore, those riders at either pre-K or K convert to walkers beginning in grade 1. The Transportation Division has outlined a safe route to walk to school through the neighborhood on sidewalks and does not include any walking on Duval Highway. I have visited this neighborhood and reviewed the walking route to High Point Elementary School. Those parents may appeal the decision to me, which again will allow any decision I make to appeal to this board. At the last board meeting, so those are the two transportation. I want to talk a little bit about our water testing. At the last board meeting, I misspoke when talking about our water testing program, and it's something I want to correct. I stated at the time that there are only 4 labs in the state of Maryland certified to do this type of water lead testing. That is not accurate. That was my mistake. There are more than 4 labs. In a conversation with staff prior to our last meeting, I misinterpreted the information that was shared with me, and I want to correct my statement. To continue, we aggressively test the water outlets in our schools and post that data as soon as we receive it and information to our website. The lab we currently have under contract has hired more field staff as well as lab techs. I spoke about that at our last meeting, and therefore is testing more schools per week. We are increasing the number of schools that we're able to test. Additionally, we have found another lab that has agreed to enter into a contract with us to test additional schools so that we can work through this process more quickly. We are working through the contract process now to get this second lab testing in AACPS as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Mr. Grannon.
Thank you. I want to ask a question about the Lindale Middle School transportation issue. I don't know if that parent is here. I think it was Ms. Coleman. I don't know if she's here, but of course this wasn't on the published agenda, so perhaps she didn't know it would be addressed. She had raised the possibility of the middle schoolers walking to a different bus stop that would not incur any additional cost for the school system, to account for the fact that I think she described that there's some train tracks involved in this route, and Mr. Reinhardt had asked you in response to your comment that we can't make exceptions loosely because that will lead to basically an unraveling of bus route planning for families throughout the county. And I think Mr. Reinhardt asked you, well, are there other routes that have this issue with train tracks? And I think your response was no. So I'm pretty sure I specifically asked you to address the feasibility of, so setting aside perhaps your policy preference not to make exceptions, I want to know about the feasibility of what she suggested, which is having those students walk to another bus stop, that there's room on the bus, and that this would not impose any additional costs.
So, Ms. Grannon, that'll be something that if the parent appeals the current decision and it comes to the board, that'll be something that this board can entertain if they so choose to override current policy. I have reviewed it. I've not made an official decision on this because it's not officially been appealed to me. So that's why I want to stress that if the families have additional information that I'm not aware of, either way they should appeal that to me so that can put it into the pipeline, which then any decision I make, as you well know, can be appealed to this board. And so if that's something, the feasibility will have to be something that you as a board will determine. If you think it's feasible and appropriate to allow families to get on buses that live within 1.5 miles of a middle school, even though it may not incur any additional cost, it's not something that I can guarantee into the future as additional families move into a school into that district that live 1.5 miles and beyond, and that may be taking that bus. That would be up to this board to make a decision.
Mr. Butcher.
Dr. Lau, thank you for that. Mr. Grannon, the reason I didn't second your motion to have this added as an agenda item, and I want to get some clarification from you because you're bringing this up again. This was not before the board. Last week, 2 weeks ago, it was not before the board in the proper way for purposes of us to review, a decision. Why would we want to address this before it's properly before the board if it hasn't been appealed? Because the information came to us in a public forum. It was a public comment.
Mr.
Are
Grannon.
you ready for me to respond to that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was an express agenda item last time. I didn't put it on the agenda. Obviously, others decided that it should be an agenda item, and it said, I think it was described transportation issues. And in response to the public comment, from a couple of different families, including the one, again, I apologize for getting her name wrong. I think it was Ms. Coleman. She made some comments that made a lot of good sense to me. And Dr. Alato's response was, go see such and such after this meeting. And I don't think that's a proper resolution for issues that are raised in public. Had it not been raised in public, then that would be a different story. Had it been raised in just some correspondence to the transportation office or to Dr. Alato, that would be a different story. But because it was raised here in a public forum, I think for purposes of transparency and accountability, we need to give the responses in public. Now, if the response is, I can't comment on this because it's a matter of an appeal or litigation or something, that's a different story. But I don't think it makes any sense to list transportation issues as a specified item on our agenda and then to say, well, we're going to take the follow-up to it and we're going to bury it in the superintendent's report so that those people have no idea that it's on the agenda. If this had been listed on the agenda, they could have come back here and they could have given a response. But they're probably not here because they didn't know. And I don't think that's accountable.
Would they not be able to do that if they specifically appealed the decision?
They very well could do that, but as we've heard, there's no pending appeal right now. What is the point of having the public give public comment on issues, and then we say, well, we're going to look into it, or the administration says we're going to look into it. If there's going to be follow-up, what's the point? Let's put it this way. Why would it possibly be appropriate for Dr. Alato to say what he said today about Lindale Middle School, right? He obviously thought it was appropriate to comment on that, but not specify it on the agenda to give the public notice that it was coming. What could be the possible reason for that? Can you name one?
Dr. Alato, have the families that that came and spoke at the last meeting, has the school system been in touch with them to inform them of the process?
We're going to reach out to them. So, right. So
The
answer is yes.
They've already been notified and explained the appeal procedures so that they can move forward in the proper channels to have this addressed. So they have all been. We've been in contact with them since the last meeting.
And I do want to mention, Ms. Grant, I'm not in any attempt trying to bury any information. If somebody from the public brings information that's new to me or that, and that I want to look more into, we do that with that family or that group of people. We are in communication with them. It doesn't mean that I'm in communication with the entirety of Anne Arundel County Public Schools. I'm in touch with those families that have their concerns so we can address their concerns directly.
Mr. Granon.
And Dr. Alato, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the substance of what you said. I might not agree with it, but I appreciate the substance of what you said. I'm addressing Mr. Butcher's question to me, and his explanation for, he could second or not as he so chooses. That's fine, but it almost had the air that there was something inappropriate about what I was suggesting. And what I'm saying is, if the exact same information that you gave right now was appropriate to share, I'm not commenting on the substance of it, then it would have been more appropriate to have it listed as a specified agenda item so that the public can know in advance that it was going to be discussed, not swept into some catch-all category of superintendent's update, which was not even on the last agenda.
Mr. Butcher?
I mean, you're looking at me, and I like the approach, whether it's public or not. If Dr. Alato is saying that their staff is directly communicating with the people that raise the issues, whether it's transportation or anything else, which I've seen them do frequently, then I think you're directly addressing the issue. I don't know why it has to be on the agenda. So I was just trying to get some clarification for you. I wasn't suggesting that you were doing anything inappropriate. I like the idea of us discussing things in public. I don't have a problem with that. But for this particular issue, if what they're saying is that they've had communications with the specific families, like they've done time after time after time with different issues that pop up, I'm okay with that.
Mr. Reinhardt?
I wasn't going to push the button, and then I pushed the button, and then
You've been holding the button.
I'm thinking about it. So, what I do find inappropriate is a suggestion that there is a vast bus stop conspiracy to disenfranchise certain members of our community from getting a bus stop. That is categorically false. I have been working with many of the folks with concerns regarding bus routes and bus transportation personally, but let me be clear for our public and for other members of the board who may not realize that this board does not micromanage the school system. We do not pick bus routes. We do not pick bus stops. We do not pick toppings on pizza at lunch. We do not pick the color of the mulch. The responsibility of this school board is oversight, big picture, big direction. Where are we going? Strategic plans, 5-year plans, 6-year capital improvement plans, big picture stuff. And what we do in our quasi-judicial fashion, which most often occurs in our caucus room in the back, which is why we're usually late, is when we are looking at those appeals and when it's gone through 6 or 7 hands and the person who is making that appeal is not happy with the results and it finally gets to us, then we ask those tough questions. How are distances measured? How are things considered? Why was that color of the mulch chosen for the playground? Those really tough questions when they come to us. And the beautiful thing is if folks aren't happy with our decision, they can go to the state. We're not the end of the line. But folks need to understand that while we may be the easiest contact, and folks just contact the board, we don't make 99% of the decisions on how the system is run. What we do is we meet with leadership, let them understand our community's priorities, or in the case of at-large members, the entire district's priorities, and we share that and we have discussions. But you have to remember that this school district is a giant cargo ship, and this board is just a little tugboat that nudges it and nudges it and nudges it and gets it going in the right direction. And it takes time. The public should still keep contacting us. We want to be part of that, and we will share everything that we hear with our board assistants and with the executive team. We will continue to share. But ultimately, the day-to-day operation of this school system is Dr. Arlotto and his staff's responsibility. I just needed to say that because we continue to have discussions up here on the dais about minuscule topics that are extremely important to the public. We will not get that wrong. But in terms of big picture that this board is responsible for, we will wait for that appeal to come. And when it comes, we will give it 100% of our attention, we will get all of that information, and we will make the best decision that we can with the information we have at the time. And if folks still don't like it, they can appeal it to the state, and that's okay. But we will feel that we do our due diligence at the time it's right. And now is not that time. Thank you.
Mr. Granin.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor this. I just want to, I guess I'm still in just, I don't understand what the reason could be to provide the substance of what Dr. Arlotto said regarding the Lindale Middle School transportation issue and not have it specified on the agenda so that the people who are actually concerned could know that it would be addressed. All I'm saying, and this is to Mr. Butcher or anyone else who questions this, by not having it on the agenda, those people didn't know. They didn't know to come to this meeting to listen to that. What if what Dr. Arlotto is saying is missing some information? They have the right to give public comment in response to what he says. It's not just, well, he says, well, here's what we're doing, and that's enough. Now, with regard to what Mr. Reinhardt said, that's fine. That's your view. Maybe that view is not shared by maybe that view is not shared by the legislature. Maybe that's why the legislature is changing the composition of this board. But I'm going to tell you right now, if 5 of us think the mulch that is being chosen is not getting the job done, I very much think it is the job of 5 of us to say to whoever the superintendent is, your mulch ain't getting the job done. If you don't view it that way, that's your choice. I'm going to continue to do that.
It's, Mr. Burns, could we have you come up for a point of order for us, please?
President Hummer, members of the board, Dr. Arlotto, for the record, Darren Burns, board counsel.
Yes, it's kind of, so could you clarify for us under state regulations some of these issues that have arisen here?
Well, I think actually both Mr. Reinhardt and Mr. Granite have made points that can be reasonably argued in the direction they wish to go. I think it is ultimately up to a majority of the board to decide what it means to be the tugboat or be the lead ship or anything else. Having said that, though, Mr. Reinhardt's correct in terms of setting forth the actual state law driven mission of a local board of education, and I don't think I could articulate it better without citing a bunch of statutes than he did. I do think it's important on this particular point that the reason I believe Dr. Arlotto brought back some specific information about some specific situations is that at your last meeting, that request was made of him. And so unless Dr. Arlotto was prepared to, at that point in time or in the intervening time, come up with a legal reason not to come back and talk to you, he was going to provide that information. So that answers the question, why would he provide that information? In terms of the agenda, I do want to correct the record. It was said that there was a transportation issues item on the agenda last week. It was actually called transportation update, and it was called Update on Transportation, and the cover sheet said, on April 18th, staff provided to the Board of Education an update regarding implementation of the transportation routing system, which I believe is software-based and other things. And so that's last spring, and it was going to be implemented at the outset of this school year, 2018-19. So the point of the report last week, as a matter of public record, was an update on the implementation. To the extent the public, rightly or wrongly, no one objected to it, and the public, 3 or 4 people came up and spoke on transportation-related issues at that time. I'm not so sure they could not have spoken on those issues in the public comment period, but they spoke at the time of the transportation update. 1 or 2 of them raised issues that sounded like the kind you could hear on appeal. But to our knowledge, and your knowledge as a board, there were no pending appeals. So they said what they said in public comment. They raised issues for the board members. That's entirely appropriate. They raised issues for Dr. Arlotto at the request of 2 board members to report back on. And there is certainly nothing in your policy, your handbook, or the law that says the superintendent cannot report back to the board members as requested at some point at the next meeting or whenever you request it. And there's nothing wrong with it being placed in the agenda as a superintendent update or, frankly, as any other item that the board agenda wishes to create. But there was no transportation update or transportation issues update. It was a routing implementation update that led to public comment, that led to questions to the superintendent. So, with respect to Mr. Granite's question, again, I don't think it's a legal issue. I think you all are having your discussion on it. It's entirely appropriate. But there's no law that would have dictated where on the agenda this falls. There's nothing in your policy that dictated it. To the extent the board president and others seek a certain agenda, you all worked out amongst yourselves. That's the agenda that's published. The update was given. I'm not sure there's anything for the lawyer to comment on. And I will want to say one thing too. Dr. Arlotto is correct. It is important that nobody misunderstand this. Under Section 4-205C of the education article, which breathes life into the appeal process that I think Mr. Reinhardt alluded to as well, and Mr. Granite's aware of, it's pretty clear cut that in any school system in the state, the superintendent's job is to administer the school system, there's more words in the statute, and to decide all disputes and controversies involving the local policies and regulations of the school system. That's a blessing, sort of a blessing and a curse, and it's a sword and a shield, because what that means is when ultimately parents or other constituents are not happy with a decision by Anne Arundel County Public Schools administrators, it eventually must, they have a right within certain time frames to have the superintendent review their concern. There is no exception except certain things dealing with certificated employees and the Public School Labor Relations Board. And once he makes that decision, and again, as Mr. Reinhardt noted, at that point in time, if the folks involved, the individuals involved, are not happy with that superintendent's decision, again, 4205C3 gives them the right to come before this board, and you have policies and procedures governing those appeals.
Thank you. Ms. Corbalett.
I just wanted to say that the most important thing we've heard today is that our 2 customers, the family at the Lindale Middle and the High Point Elementary School, have been contacted, and they are aware of their appeal rights, and hopefully, if they choose, they will follow them. So I think the matter's been settled in terms of the family at this point. And I also think that getting involved in the minutia of these disputes and controversies before they've even come to the superintendent is a dangerous precedent for us, because we might have to recuse ourselves from the final vote. And we want to make sure that we have a full board that can vote on an appeal. So we bring things to Dr. Arlotto's attention and we let him go so that he and his staff can handle it. And if a family is unhappy with the decision, they appeal it. And we can then evaluate the appeal in all fairness.
All right, now we're going to take a brief break so that we can take pictures with our two employee and volunteer of the month, and then we will come back for public comment. The meeting is called back to order. We will now move on to public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on an item not on today's agenda and who has signed up prior to the board establishing the agenda order a few minutes ago may offer testimony during this public comment portion of the meeting. Speakers are allotted 3 minutes each and may not allocate their time to others. A tone will sound when time has expired. The board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing this meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. It is not the board's general practice to engage in question and answer session with speakers. Questions may be posed by speakers, but any answers will count as part of the 3-minute limit. For the record, please give your name before speaking. Handouts should be given to the board assistant. If you did not sign up in time to speak today, you may submit written testimony to the board's assistant today or via email at any time. And we have two for public comment, Lisa Van Buskirk and Melissa Ellis.
Good morning, Board of Education and Superintendent Nalado. Lisa Van Buskirk will start school later. Thank you very much, Mr. Gran, for seeking transparency for all things that the Board of Education and AACPS does. I wasn't planning on being here today because I'm waiting for some information, but something happened yesterday up in Hartford County at 6:42 a.m. A 16-year-old was struck and killed while running to catch his bus. Civil daylight was just beginning because sunrise was at 7:12 a.m. Could this tragedy happen here in Anne Arundel County? Yes, sadly it can. Because in January, the latest sunrise time is 7:24, which means almost all of Anne Arundel County's buses have started or are well into their bus pickups before it even begins to get light. Could this accident happen in daylight? Of course, accidents happen 24 hours a day. But then the students would be visible to the drivers should that terrible accident happen. Has such an accident as this happened in Anne Arundel County? Sadly, yes. Jalen Ash, age 15, was a freshman at Meade High School when he died at 6 a.m. on December 21st, 2012, after being struck by a car while crossing the street. How can we ensure that future student pedestrians don't have accidents in this dark? By using our transportation software that by the BOE setting parameters or a policy of reasonable and safe pickup times. This isn't micromanaging the transportation department, it's setting a policy for safe policy for AACPS to implement, and then by holding them accountable to that safe policy for all students. On the second topic, when a transportation specialist tells a parent that the software for bus routing regarding the software for bus routing, she has no idea for what it's supposed to be used, everyone's having trouble with it, and she sees no use for it, then I think we have a communication problem between this board's vision of why the software was purchased and the end users, and then certainly your customers. I think we also have a training problem if the software isn't being used. This board could help the transportation employees by hiring outside help, as I've suggested many times. A representative from Education Logistics, also known as EduLog, reached out to me in September after my letter to the editor regarding bus routing and the smartphone app. Surely they've reached out to AACPS and not just me. And they're not the only company available to help. There's time before this board has a major change in membership where you could actually begin to help the students and the transportation specialists by seeking outside assistance and begin to implement safe school bus policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Buskirk.
Good morning, Melissa Ellis, Dr. Arlotto, Mr. Grannon, and other members of the board. I'm here to give you another transportation update. I have two high school students, and their bus started arriving earlier and earlier as the year has gone on, and I expressed my concern to Transportation Department that they're being picked up too early. And the answer given to me was the bus driver indicated that she had to show up when she was in order to get to the school on time. On Monday, my kids missed the bus, so we headed straight for the school. We got there quite early, and so I pulled up in the parking lot and let my kids wait in the car instead of getting out unreasonably early, and this is what I observed. At 7:00 a.m., my children's bus arrived, second one in the lot, pulled up to the curb and sat full of kids and just sat. At 7:08, the doors open and the kids began to get off the bus. And when those kids got off the bus, they went to the front of the school where the doors were locked and gathered in a huge mob of students. And this mob grew until the kids were spilling out into the street as the later arriving buses came. Then my kids narrated for me their experience that comes after this. At 7:15, the doors to the school open. Remember, there's over 2,000 kids in this school. The doors to the school open, and my kids said, this mass of students files into the school, and there's just a big bottleneck. The front hall of the school fills with students. And as the students are entering the school, they can't move because there's such a mass of students, and they're still coming in from behind. And as this is happening, and as kids are basically frozen in place for up to 30 seconds, as my students described, there's adults in the hallways yelling at them, keep moving. My son described it as feeling like an inmate. The health and safety concerns here are tremendous. Not only are our kids getting on a bus unnecessarily early, but this mass of students, 2,000 students in the front of the school for, I observed, 7 minutes. What if a fight breaks out? What if a student gets sick in the middle of this immobile mob? What if the worst case scenario that we all fear and we now train for happens? If buses would simply arrive at 7:15, the kids get off the bus, walk into the school, into their classroom. There's no mob of students situation. So I would like you to please use the software. This bus is not sticking to its scheduled pickup times. I would like all of the buses to use their scheduled times and not arrive at school before 7:15. Thank you.
Mr. Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam President. Which school?
Annapolis High School. I suspect it's not the only school like that, but that's what I observed.
Just one for clarity. So, Dr. Arlotto, do we have a sense of how many buses service Annapolis High School?
I don't have that number off the top of my head.
It feels like 100 when I'm waiting.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a lot.
So
It fills the front lot, that's for sure.
it does. So
Yeah.
probably
Absolutely.
upwards of 30.
There's a
At
lot of
least.
buses,
Okay,
yes, it serves
okay.
that school.
And is that a school level decision of when they open the doors and allow students in, or does this board have a policy that states when school doors must be open for students?
So there are a couple of issues that are on the table. So to answer your question directly, it's the school will make that decision when they're going to open, but we have a contractual basis of when teachers begin having the responsibility of students in the building. So we have a certain contractual time of when the adults have responsibility for students, our teachers, and so we just can't allow students in the building if they arrive at 6 a.m. and then open the doors. I'm using that figuratively for conversation's sake, for explanation's sake, and then have an adult responsible for them. When the students enter the building, we have to have an adult responsible for them. So we have contractual obligations about when we can open the doors to allow the students in. The other piece is getting the students there on time, right? And so it's as much of a ballet, as you well know, as transportation is, and timing. So much of it is dictated by, particularly in the morning and then in the afternoons, by traffic. And so, yes, sometimes buses pick up earlier and arrive earlier and idle with students on bus before allowing them in, because it's not an exact science to have the bus pull up, students get out, and it's exactly the time they can walk into the building. We would like it to be that way. That's what transportation aims for. It's not an exact science in that ballet of buses arriving, the students disembarking from the bus and being able to walk directly into the building.
And this is the first run of the day for these buses. They have other schools to go to after this?
Correct.
And would their drop-off time be dependent on what their next route was?
Could be. So they'll need to obviously pick up at a time, then drop off at a time so they can exit that school parking lot to get to the next run. That bus could have upwards of 4 runs in a day. So that's their first run of the day. Then they're circling back and now doing a neighborhood of middle school, elementary school, and they could do 2 elementary runs.
So coming back to Ms. Van Buskirk's earlier public statement, she mentioned that the latest sunrise was 7:24 a.m. And I found that in the Baltimore region, the earliest sunset is 4:43. So we're looking at our leanest time. We have a little over 9 hours to do 4 bus runs in the morning, teach our students, and then do 4 bus runs in the afternoon. Is it possible to get all that done in a little over 9 hours?
I've not attempted to do the math and sit down. That's a tough timetable to adhere to. I don't know with those bookends, if you're talking about just daylight hours only, that's a real, which is I think what you're referring to, daylight hours only, I think that's a pretty tough call.
Ms. Nally.
I observed 3 different high schools. I'm not usually up this early, but I've been up early, taking grandchildren and whatnot, and 10 minutes difference is huge in the Annapolis area, in the Severn Park area, for traffic. I worry, and I understand we won't, all the need for, they're saying for the later bus times and all this, but the traffic is absolutely, Severna Park High School this morning, all the school had started when I passed. The traffic was bumper to bumper both ways. It took me a good 20-25 minutes to get down Benfield. I cannot imagine if Severna Park High School started 15 or 20 minutes later. I don't even know if the buses would get there. It's unbelievable. I've never really witnessed it. Then I was out, same thing, Annapolis High School, after it was all settled. I couldn't believe the traffic on Riva Road. So I'm just wondering, and I fully understand. I mean, I was a principal, and I know when those kids' buses arrived, I wanted to be able to bring them in. But I was in elementary school, a little bit different numbers. But you still, it's hard. It's hard.
I understand it's hard.
You know, it really is hard. And I don't know. I don't think starting later, starting earlier, 8 minutes. If that bus didn't pick up at 7, if they picked up 10 minutes later, I know if I leave to pick up when I'm doing some carpooling, 10 minutes later, I'm done. So I don't know. I think it's really, really tough. That's all I'm saying.
I'm sure it's tough, but I think it's something we have to fix. This is a major safety issue.
Well, and I think a part of it can be a decision about not letting that many students come in the building at once. You know, there are ways to rectify it other than just this. The buses are tough for 30 or 40 buses and figuring it out.
Mr. Granin.
Thank you. I just have a quick question for Dr. Arlato or whoever might have the information to answer this. I assume, and disabuse me of this if I'm wrong, but I assume the published bus timetables are the product of the software after it's been optimized and all that stuff. How frequently does a sort of real-world deviation from that schedule, how frequently does that have to happen before the schedule is adjusted? And I guess my question is, how many times does the bus have to come 10 minutes early before the schedule is actually changed to account for that? Or how many times does the bus have to come 10 minutes late before the schedule is changed? That's what I'm trying to get a sense of.
So it's usually, and this was part of the update that you got several weeks ago, or in August. This very topic was discussed. It's usually the first couple of weeks of school that bus drivers will make some adjustments, and even more so this year because we were going on the numbers that the software produced, and then the people then have to go back as the bus drivers are running those routes based on those numbers produced by the software to make adjustments. So there are times throughout the year that could be tweaked when the buses are running perfectly well and on time, coming and going, and then construction happens on 175. And when the construction project crops up, then they might have to make some adjustments and let the families know that they might be coming or going. So that does happen throughout the year, but it's fairly infrequent. It's typically in the first 2 weeks of the school year, sometimes 3, that adjustments are being made to the schedules from what was initially published.
So in response to this point, if it were an ongoing issue that the bus were 10 minutes early for 2 weeks in a row or something, like the schedule would be changed.
It should be changed, and it should be. It should
Do
be
you
looked
want
at.
real world,
It should be. It should be looked at and should be adjusted. Yeah.
Do you want a real world observation on that?
Well, so if we could, Dr. Arlotto, could we have transportation check into the bus times for Miss Ellis's bus?
I wrote down several things, not the least of which is the students are entering the building.
Right.
Something that we can take a look at. That would be a concern of mine. And Mrs. Nally brought up the students entering the building all at once. We've got several entrances in Annapolis High School, and I know we've utilized those in the past to allow students in separate entrances. It all depends on what the coverage is in the morning for the school. So I can't speak to that specifically, but I certainly can talk to Mr. Gelinas and the staff at Annapolis High School.
And what is the bus number?
605.
605, and I believe it's a PVA bus.
That is correct.
Okay. So if they will
look into it.
follow up
Absolutely.
on that.
Glad to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Items 4.01 through 4.13 are award of contracts. Do I have a motion to bundle items 4.01 through 4.13?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Connolly, would you please call the roll for this agenda item?
Mrs. Nally. Mr. Reinhardt. Mr. Butcher. Mr. Grannon. Ms. Korbelak.
Yes.
Ms. Urea.
Aye.
Mr. Gilliland. Ms. Hummer.
Yes. Okay.
8-0.
All right. Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the Board of Education award contracts as listed on today's agenda, 4.01 through 4.13.
Okay. Do we have some staff that's coming up? Because I think we have some questions. So, Mr. Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam President. With regards to agenda item 4.01, Dreambox Learning, I can see that we are purchasing 16 additional site licenses for Dreambox. Do we have a training plan in place for those 16 new schools in order to effectively use Dreambox?
So Alec Cheknovich, Chief Operating Officer. The answer to that is yes, and it's two-part. Obviously, our Instructional Technology Division handles the more technical aspects of providing that, but our Curriculum and Instruction Department actually does more of the hand-holding with our individual teachers. So it's a two-pronged support approach to any of our software packages.
So I ask because in other contracts that we've reviewed, it calls out that the vendor provides training. So in this case, this is all being handled internally.
Right. That's always on a case-by-case basis, and it has to do with really the complexity. This is an expansion of an already existing program. So in a case like this, we've got a better handle on it because we've already been using it. If it's brand new to the district, and even we lack some of the internal capacity early on, we may have vendors support us. But with an existing product or an expansion of an already existing well-understood platform, we don't feel that we in general have to pay additional funding for that external support.
Okay, thank you.
Item 4.02 says Gymnasium and Program Addition at Glen Burnie Park. What is a program addition?
So Glen Burnie Park Elementary School, for those of you who've been there, is kind of a unique school. So for example, it had a multi-purpose room. It didn't have a separate gymnasium and cafeteria, so that's one issue. The school never had a media center at it. We actually commandeered 2 classrooms and converted it into a media center. That's being rectified. The classroom never had a music room. Inadequate space was being used to provide music as well as some of the resources that the community there in Glen Burnie Park now needs more support services than it did when a building was built 50 plus years ago. And so we're putting in some additional resource space there. So The reason we call it this is it's not a capacity. It's not a growing school in terms of we're providing a capacity addition. It's a programmatic addition to support some of the program and instructional delivery offering deficiencies in the building. So generally our additions fall into 3 clumps basically, and you're familiar with kindergarten, K and pre-K. That's sort of one class onto itself. Then we've got enrollment additions that are just do with number count, head count going up, but we also try to address program deficiencies when the building is inadequately supporting the student population and delivery of instruction. This one falls into category 3.
And that will add, if I'm not mistaken, now what we'll able to do is recapture classroom space. So now with these new programmatic spaces, the school, while not growing, they'll capture square footage in terms of classroom instructional space.
Correct.
Mr. Reinhardt.
Also on 4.02, I'm having trouble remembering when the drawings came in front of the board for this. Was that last fiscal year? Has it been a couple?
Oh, it's been over a year ago.
Okay.
Item 4.04, the open space enclosure for Chesapeake Middle School. I thought we'd already started on that. Was I mistaken? Was I confusing it with Chesapeake High School?
Chesapeake High School is actually being brought to a conclusion. It's already fully occupied. What you're remembering are all the different design elements, the architectural contracts, et cetera. This is actually the physical construction kickoff contract.
Okay. I was thinking it was already underway, but I guess it is, and that we're ready to go now. They have the plans. All right. Make sure I don't have any others. Are there any other board questions or comments? Okay. Is there any public comment? All right. Ms. Connolly, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Nally?
Yes.
Mr. Reinhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Butcher?
Aye.
Mr. Grannon?
Aye.
Ms. Korbelak?
Aye.
Ms. Urea?
Aye.
Mr. Gilliland?
Aye.
Mrs. Hummer?
Aye.
8-0, motion passes.
Item 5.01 is administrative personnel appointments. Dr. Olato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend board approval of the personnel listed on the attached sheet be promoted and or appointed.
Do I have a second? Second. Okay. Mr. Reinhardt.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly endorse Mr. Kaufman for this position, if only that we should give saxophone players an opportunity for leadership at all times.
That was the main criteria, I believe.
I'm not even sure where to go with that, Mr. Reinhardt, but thank you for the suggestion.
Are there any other board questions or comments? Ms. Connolly, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Nally? Mr. Reinhardt? Mr. Butcher? Mr. Grannon? Ms. Korbelak?
Aye.
Ms. Urea?
Aye.
Mr. Gilliland? And Mrs. Hummer?
Aye.
8-0, motion passes.
Okay. Item 5.02 is personnel. Dr. Olato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the board approve the actions as stipulated on the attached sheets.
Okay. Are there any board questions or comments? Mr. Reinhardt.
Yeah, I'm going to get my streak from last time. How many vacancies do we still have?
Direct classroom vacancies, we have 22.
22. Okay.
We have other vacancies, but direct classroom.
Are there any other questions? Ms. Connolly, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Nally? Mr. Reinhardt? Mr. Butcher? Mr. Grannon? Ms. Korbelak?
Aye.
Ms. Urea? Mr. Gilliland?
Aye.
Mrs. Hummer?
Aye.
8-0, motion passes.
Item 5.03 is filling a vacancy on the Executive Committee of the Countywide Citizens Advisory Committee. This is our own item, so it's not a recommendation from the superintendent. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Are there any board questions or comments? I don't think we take public comment on this. Ms. Connolly, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Nally? Mr. Reinhardt? Mr. Butcher? Mr. Grannon? Ms. Korbelak?
Aye.
Ms. Urea?
Aye.
Mr. Gilliland?
Aye.
Mrs. Hummer?
Aye.
8-0, motion passes.
Okay. Item 5.04 is the Crofton Woods Elementary Classroom Addition. Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend board approval of the Crofton Woods Elementary School Classroom Addition Design Development.
Okay, are there any board questions or comments? Oh, did you second? Second it. So are there any board questions or comments? I actually have a question. So on page 11, it says current and pending for different capacity issues. What is the pending? What does that mean?
During construction, we regularly review space usage at the school to determine what the SRC is, as well as how much we're able to apply for state funds. So we recently sent up a request for Crofton Woods to have a revised SRC and square footage. And that's what that's reflecting until it's approved.
Okay, so this is a requested amendment to that. Yep. All right. So are there any other board questions or comments? Is there any public comment? Okay, come on up.
Good morning. I'm Pat Hooker. I live in Crofton, and I have some questions about this exhibit. I'm just sort of was sleeping. I didn't realize that classroom additions were so popular in Anne Arundel County. And my question on this one is that in 2010, Crofton Woods Elementary School had a 5-classroom addition. And here we are 8 years later, and Crofton Woods Elementary School is getting a 6-classroom addition. And my question is a school system question, not just to this particular school. How many classroom additions can you put on an elementary school before that gentleman gets concerned? How many classroom additions can the original core of an elementary school support before you start to diminish the program that those children are receiving? And I don't need an answer now. I'm going to leave my name. And the second question I have has to do with this gentleman. I read on page 18 that Crofton Woods Elementary currently has a student capacity of 639, and that's everywhere. That's what it does. And we're going to add 6 classrooms, and we hope to take the capacity up to 833. That's 194 students. My recollection from years ago was that 23 was the number, that it would be 6 times 23 for the addition, not 6 times 32 and a half. So that's my second question. I would like someone to address the issue of how we're going from 639 to 833 with just 6 classrooms. And I will leave my name and my contact information, and I don't care who gets back to me or how it's done, but I will appreciate someone getting back to me. Thank you.
We'll be happy to get back to her. Yes, we'll get in some details. Ms. Corbalette.
Just curious, is Two Rivers community feeding into Crofton Woods? Is that driving the growth at all?
No, right now they're at Crofton Elementary.
Okay, thanks.
Was the addition that was done in 2010, was that a kindergarten addition?
That is correct.
So that was not a regular classroom, that was part of the 2010 edition was a kindergarten classroom addition, which we have done to all schools as they moved forward into all-day kindergarten.
Okay, I'm sorry, we added 5, it says 5 classroom addition, it was 5 kindergarten classes?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes. Mr. Grannon.
I'm sorry, but that would have then released the classes, as Dr. Arlotto referred to, that served as kindergarten classes to regular classes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
With one caveat, that it was in 2007 that all-day K became mandatory. So we're still catching up with that. That's the reason we still have some classroom villas on the outside of buildings to still accommodate. So we're still catching up with classroom additions because it was not the law at the time until 2007 that you had to have all-day kindergarten. So we're still catching up with something that we didn't have to provide prior to that.
I have read that you have a lot of kindergarten additions going on.
Mr. Grannon.
I guess I just wanted to, are those questions unanswerable now? Is that why do you not have the information to answer those questions?
No, I can answer that now.
Yeah.
I would really like you to answer them in send me an email or
Well,
some sort of written correspondence, because I'll get it wrong. So I would appreciate if you could do that.
We can do both. We can do both.
That would be good.
Because again, when you raise questions in public, to the extent that there's answers, there's no reason they should be answered in public. So, you know, for example, the one person that's watching us on TV right now might like to know the answer to those questions.
So just referring back to page 11 of the report, they do have the current and the pending. So the 639 came from the current, which is approved by the state, and the 695 will be the revised SRC. It is still 23 per classroom, which will get you a total of 833. And if needed, we can submit the SRC calculations of how we received.
So those figures do work out as to 23 per classroom.
Yes, we just left the 639 because that's the official approved SRC that the state recognizes. So to avoid confusion when the state reviews this, we left that as a pending column and a approved column.
And it's not all that unusual that we get state-rated capacity changed. As things in a building change, that we sometimes they are increased or lowered based on different programmatic things.
Right, there's a number of different times where we would review SRCs, and construction is one of those times.
Mr. Gilliland.
Thank you, Madam President. Just in the interest of both transparency and clarification, I think there was an additional question about the core of the building sustaining a certain number of modular additions. And again, that's not necessarily meant to be a curveball question at you on the fly here, but is it true that, or obviously I know it's true, our newer buildings are being built more in a format that can accommodate some of the additions that may have to occur long term, but the older buildings, is there, and I don't know when that changed, let's call it 1990s or at some point in the 2000s, but are there older buildings that we don't have that ability to add, or is it just it varies by building?
It varies by building, but there's been a number of different avenues that we've taken to increase the core, including gym additions, that have allowed us to increase the cores.
Kind of individual per each building as to what it can sustain with additions or whatever. But our newer buildings, we do kind of make the plans so that if an addition is needed in the future, it's set to be added on as we get funds and students. Okay. Are there any further questions? Ms. Connolly, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Nally. Mr. Reinhardt.
Aye.
Mr. Butcher.
Aye.
Mr. Grannon.
Aye.
Mrs. Korblack.
Aye.
Ms. Urea. Mr. Gilliland.
Aye.
Mrs. Hummer.
Aye.
8-0, motion passes.
Okay. Item 5.05 is the Linthicum Elementary School Kindergarten Edition, Design Development. Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend board approval of the Linthicum Elementary School Kindergarten Edition Design Development.
Do I have a second? Second. Okay. Are there any board questions? I actually have one too. Mr. Reinhardt, before I jump into you, what is the current enrollment of Linthicum Elementary? I didn't see it in here.
I would have to look that up for you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I will get back to you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Reinhardt.
I would like to compliment the architects on preserving the outdoor teaching area in front. I know the students have spent a great deal of time working with monarch butterflies that like to frequent that area, and that is one of the highlights of visiting the school. So thank you for that. Recently, a new fence has been installed around Linthicum Elementary. Is that fence designated somehow on these drawings?
The fence was installed by the Recs and Parks
Recs and Park,
Department.
Yeah,
So-
because I noticed that there was also a new 30 by 30 play area with a 4-foot fence. And typically we don't fence in our playgrounds. Why was that decision made?
It should not be. It's just something that they've made an error on. We don't normally do it, so we would not do it in this case.
So should we not approve this document be?
We'll correct it in the next revision of the drawings. The CD package will have that reflection.
Will it still will be a play area, it just won't have a 4-foot fence around it?
Correct.
Mr. Gilliland.
Thank you again, Madam President. Just one question. What is a micro retention area? And I'm sorry if somebody asked that.
It's where we keep pre-K students.
It's a grading swale, so it's for water retention.
And just as a follow, is that for teaching purposes, or that's just for? Okay,
that's for permitting.
Stormwater management. Perfect. Perfect.
Are there any further board questions? Are there any public comments or questions? Ms. Connolly, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Nally. Mr. Reinhardt. Mr. Butcher. Mr. Grannon. Ms. Korblack. Ms. Urea. Mr. Gilliland.
Aye.
And Mrs. Hummer.
Aye.
8-0, motion passes.
Okay. Item 5.06 is Millersville Elementary School Kindergarten Edition. Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend board approval of the Millersville Elementary School Kindergarten Edition design development.
Okay. Mr. Reinhardt.
I missed it a little bit earlier. I had to. Anyway, page 33 of the elevations. So I noticed on the side of the building there's an architectural element with those vertical white stripes. Are those still windows that students will be able to see out of, or is there some structural element behind there?
It's more of an architectural feature. It's steel sheeting.
It's steel sheeting.
Steel sheeting.
So that will decrease the amount of sunlight going into the classrooms then?
Yes. Yes, it will decrease some of the light in the classroom.
Okay. Is there a state recommendation or something in the ed specs that has a required amount of sunlight into classrooms, natural light?
We always try to strive for as much natural light as possible.
So then would you recommend not doing the steel sheeting to increase the amount, since we're striving for that?
That comment has been given to the architect, so we'll address that in the next revision.
Okay. I mean, it looks cool, but.
And I know I've asked this before, but with this kindergarten edition, we are down to how many schools that still need, I think it's about 10?
Yes, I believe that was the number.
Slowly but surely, we're getting through all of our kindergarten editions. So, Ms. Nally.
I'm just curious. I don't recognize the Horde Co. I don't know the architectural group. Have we used them before?
Yes.
Okay, I guess I'm just missed them. They're not one of the ones that I know about. Thanks.
Are there any other board questions or comments? Is there any public comment? All right, Ms. Conley, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Nally. Mr. Reinhardt. Mr. Butcher. Mr. Grannon. Ms. Korblack. Ms. Urea. Mr. Gilliland. Mrs. Hummer. 8-0, motion passes.
Okay. Item 5.05 is Tyler Heights Elementary School Stormwater Management Inspection and Maintenance Agreement. Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend board approval of the Tyler Heights Elementary School Stormwater Management Inspection and Maintenance Agreement.
Okay. Are there any board questions or comments? Okay. Is there any public comment? Ms. Connolly, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Nally. Mr. Reinhardt. Mr. Butcher. Mr. Grannon. Ms. Korblack. Ms. Urea. Mr. Gilliland. Mrs. Hummer.
Aye.
8-0, motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, item 6.01 is award of contracts. This is a review item. Are there any board questions or comments? Is there any public comment? All right. So that wraps up our meeting for the day. The next general board meeting will be Wednesday, October 24th at 7 p.m. here in the boardroom. The next policy meeting is next Wednesday, October 17th at 1 p.m. here in the board offices. Then the budget committee that was scheduled to meet for today has been changed to prior to next board meeting at 5 p.m. here in the boardroom, Wednesday, October 24th. Mr. Gilliland.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the board go into closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, or any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals, to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter, and to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to the negotiations.
Do I have a second? Okay. Do we need to call the roll on that? No. So if there are no dissents, then we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Involvement Conference. Our theme is We Are Better Together, and the importance of relationships will be at the forefront. The conference is free and open to all interested family and community members. It will be held at the Anne Arundel Community College in Arnold from 8:15 a.m. until 2 o'clock p.m. We will be joined by Superintendent Dr. George Arlotto, as well as Deputy Superintendent Dr. Maureen McMahon. Participants will choose